Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined this evening by two excellent guests. Firstly, from the SNP Socialist Group and NEC candidate for the West of Scotland, I think, Chris McCusker. Chris, how are you doing today?
Good evening, comrades. How are we? I'm
I'm not
grand.
bad. Good to have you back. And on the other side of me, we have the co-chair of the Aberdeen Independence Movement and a prospective candidate in next year's Holyrood elections, Fatima Joji. Fatima, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not bad. Good to have both of you here. And we start this evening, as we always do, with our coronavirus update. So as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 1,011,507 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 943,063 were confirmed negative, 68,444 were positive. There were 1,433 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland today, and sadly 50 new reported deaths. This will of course be an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will necessarily show symptoms, and not everyone with symptoms will necessarily get themselves tested. As always, we urge you, if you are showing symptoms of a new dry persistent cough, a temperature, or a change in your sense of taste or smell, then please do book a test as soon as you can. Of the people who have tested positive, there were 1,257 people in hospital last night, 94 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 2,927. This number only includes those who have died in hospital, having received a positive test for the virus. And the latest UK daily figures available show that 47,742 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 492 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And we also have the NRS report for this week. So as at the 1st of November, 4,649 deaths have been registered in Scotland, where the novel coronavirus was mentioned on the death certificate, according to stats published today by National Records of Scotland. Between the 26th of October and the 1st of November, 167 deaths were registered that mentioned COVID-19 on the death certificate, representing an increase of 61 deaths from the previous week. 148 of these were previously mentioned in Scottish Government daily reporting. Over two-thirds of those who died in the latest week were aged 75 and over. Just 8% were aged under 65. The majority of deaths occurred in hospitals, representing 127 deaths. 31 occurred in care homes and 9 at home or in another non-institutional setting. To place these numbers in context, the total number of all-cause deaths registered in the week ending November the 1st was 1,255, 16% higher than the average over the previous 5 years. And before we go on to the rest of today's news, if you'd like to join the conversation here, you can do so on Twitter by following us at Broadcast Scot and using the hashtag Scotland at 7. As you can see on the screen now, we will be flashing some of throughout the show, so please do get in touch if you've got anything to say. But our first story, unsurprisingly, is on what's happening in the US. And the US presidential election hangs in the balance, with Democrat Joe Biden leading in two critical Midwestern states that could tip the contest in his favor, even as President Donald Trump falsely claimed victory and made unsubstantiated allegations of electoral fraud. Biden is said to have won Wisconsin by around 20,000 votes, but the Trump campaign says it will demand a recount. Biden also appears to hold a slim advantage in neighboring Michigan. The Republican president won both states in 2016. Together with Nevada, another state where Biden held a small advantage with some votes still to be counted, those votes would deliver Biden the 270 votes needed in the state-by-state electoral college he needs to win the White House. But Trump still does have a path to victory, with those states still officially undecided. As many had feared, Trump declared himself the winner last night and demanded that voting and vote counting be stopped. He alleges that postal vote is open to fraud, and his legal team stands ready to challenge almost everything it can. Meanwhile, Biden has said he is confident in the process and called on the country to remain calm until every vote is counted. So, Chris, I think I'll come to you first on this. It is a very strange thing for us to watch, isn't it? Where decisions are announced before all the votes have been counted, and where the president can say that vote counting should be stopped at some point, isn't it? It's a very strange thing to watch.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's strange in itself, but what's even stranger is that Trump adds a vaudevillian dimension onto the sideshow, which it takes on. You could have predicted the fact that it was always going to be that he would cry wolf and immediately say that it's a non-legitimate vote,
Mm-hmm.
and there would be something else, just in order to deflect from the fact that he is at the moment actually losing. And I know that it's early days yet, but in the grand scheme of things, keeping in with the Hollywood theme, it's not all over to the fat lady sings.
Mm. Now, obviously, the president is decided by the Electoral College, which is a state by state kind of organization with each state represented sort of proportionally. Biden leads by several million votes in the popular vote, just as Hillary Clinton did in 2016. But it is still well within the bounds of possibility that Trump could win. I wonder what you think of that, particularly when we have a similar problem here, where England tends to decide our prime minister. Would we want something like the Electoral College, where a prime minister was decided, where Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland had a bit more of a say in things?
Well, there are arguments for plus and against. I personally don't like the Electoral College system. The magic number is 270.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the moment Biden is up around about 224.
Something like that. Yeah, I've not seen
Yeah,
the latest numbers.
I think Trump's down at 213. They do say that the swing in this, or the should we say the key in this is Arizona. And if he manages to win Arizona, I think that's 14 college votes.
Mm-hmm.
Then basically that's it. It's good night Vienna. When it concerns Trump, but the actual demographics of who's voted is actually quite surprising, because I was looking quite keenly at the votes in Florida and some other key states. And an awful lot, the narrative coming out of the likes of CNN and Fox News is they were trying to paint Biden as a bit of a socialist. So when you mention socialism in America, the Latino and the Hispanic votes generally think of where they've came from, and they automatically think of communism. And then when you add that into the fact that the Americans sort of like a narrow-minded view of socialism equates to Russia, then 9 times out of 10 the Hispanics and the Latinos, obviously having suffered under communist rule, will not want to touch anything connected with socialism for love nor money. And then the fact that since the 1940s, America has always associated socialism with Russia. At the end up, we all get commie. All get called commie. I'll let you fill in the blank. So, from that point of view, they're actually doing Bernie Sanders a bit of disservice, because Bernie Sanders, Biden, sorry, I do apologise. Biden is about as socialist as Keir Starmer.
I think
and that
think
just
even
tells
Keir
you-
Starmer is probably to the left of Biden. Let me just turn to Fatima now. Fatima, Chris brought up some of these demographic issues, and we have seen record turnout. It appears that Biden has got the most votes of any presidential candidate in history, but Trump in this election has got the third most votes of any candidate in history. Turnout is up across the board. And interestingly, it seems that the only group where Trump didn't increase his vote was amongst white men. Black voters, black women and men, and Hispanic men and women all seem to increase their support of Trump in a number of places. I wonder what you make of that kind of demographic issue, given that we have seen Trump being so racist and so sexist in so many situations.
I think it can't be limited to one explanation, because I've been trying to think about this all day. Why would one particular group who's marginalized by Trump, who's demonized by Trump, consider voting for him? And I just keep thinking, certain demographics, there is this inequality within households as well. So you've also got to look at the power play within households. Who's making the decisions about about what we're voting for? You could have the rampant misogyny that's within households as well, because certain demographics do have certain issues that need to be addressed. So it could be a case of that. Another instance is another, I'd say, reach out narratives. I'd say Biden could have done more to actually reach out to these communities. I don't think he's done enough to do so. So it depends where they're getting their information from as well. And I really think Biden could have been a lot stronger in challenging some of their issues and scaling up the reach out that he could have been able to do, so that he can get those votes in those demographics. So it is kind of interesting, and I'm slightly puzzled as to why Trump would still gain votes in those areas. So I think a lot of it has to do with misinformation, power play within households, and access to the correct information and democratic voting as well. So it could be a case of that.
And obviously, I mean, it's still possibly too early to start doing postmortems, but there had been strong hopes in the Democratic Party that they might be able to switch the Senate, that they might be able to win enough Senate seats to take control of both houses. And they did win 2 Senate seats, but they lost one, and that basically leaves the Senate unchanged, even if Biden wins. Do you think that Biden perhaps either didn't inspire his own side enough, or perhaps was seen as such a threat that the Trump voters or Trump-leaning voters were even more enthused to get out?
So the question is, would we have got better options than Biden? Then yes. Because I don't think Biden was the one to create this massive swing in his favor. I don't think Biden was the one to create a huge margin in this election, to win this election by a mile. I don't think Biden was the right candidate for that. So the power Biden has as an individual, I don't think was strong enough to distance himself from Trump and Trump votes. So I do see that he's not really the person I was hoping to be president this time, but I'm still optimistic that he will take this election from Trump. Is what's needed.
And Chris, we know you were a big fan of Bernie Sanders during the primaries. He was really Biden's closest rival throughout that contest, but he never really came very close to winning. I wonder, in the middle of a pandemic, do you think it was maybe a mistake for Biden to be so adamantly against some sort of universal health care?
Well, yes and no. We have to remember the fact that Biden was vice president to Barack Obama and was instrumental in introducing the Obamacare. And Biden has promised to go much further than what the healthcare is already available in America at this moment in time. Whereas Trump wants to charge, if he could get away with it, he would want to charge $10 for an elastoplast. So when you have that sort of like differential, that sort of yin yang, then people look at that and say, right, well, he is undoubtedly a socialist because he wants to introduce an affordable healthcare, whereas the demographics for the last 40 odd years, maybe even 50 years, you would suggest that the demographics of the Republicans has always been geared towards capitalism, and they are quite at ease with paying for their healthcare. But we have to remember that the majority of people who are employed actually have healthcare built in to their terms and conditions of their employment. It's sort of like an add-on of, here in Britain we have where deductions for tax and national insurance, and you're opt in for a company pension, but you also have a certain proportion taken away for your health insurance.
Yeah.
Now, the health insurance is in a gradient, and some people who have real severe health issues still have to pay.
Yeah.
On top of what their health insurance will pay out, because there's so many caveats and all the rest of it, so from my point of view, as obviously someone who takes a great interest in the fact that the National Health Service is so good in Britain, and may I possibly add the fact that it's absolutely wonderful in Scotland, but it is not so much in America unless you can afford it.
Yeah.
And being able to afford it, you have to have, be earning in the sort of like $70,000 plus market in order to, not think of sort of like, like non-essential type of healthcare. But as I say, being so tiered, if you are only paying the bare minimum, you will break your arm, maybe skiing or something like that. That's fine. They'll reset your arm, but they'll charge you for the plaster cast. They'll charge you for your sort of like bed. They'll charge you for the electricity. They'll charge you for the amount of jelly donuts that you were eating and when you were in. So it really is quite pernicious, and it does add up, as you say. And Biden wants to try and make it, a trifle more accessible. But in doing that, he is then quintessentially operating on a socialist ticket, which would then sort of like alienate himself from a certain demographic of the US vote, who, as I said earlier, you mentioned socialism and they automatically think of Che Guevara and, do you know what I mean? Chris, people like that.
I do just want to turn to Fatima here again before we move on a wee bit. But Fatima, we've heard talk about this red mirage for some time where it looked like Trump was taking a big lead, and then as the postal votes started to be counted, it would tip back towards Biden. That does appear to be what's happened in some states. And it's exactly what Trump has complained about. It's exactly what he said. Once these bags got opened up, suddenly all these votes for Biden appeared. But I wonder, what do you think will be the outcome if we do get to a stage sometime tomorrow, probably, where Biden is announced as the winner, and that appears to be what the votes have said. But Trump has already got this message out to his people that this is illegitimate. Are you worried about the potential for violence or for real societal tensions at any rate?
Yeah, because we're seeing Trump claiming he's already won and but Biden is currently in the lead, even though just slightly. But then we've got Trump promoting the view that the election is being stolen from him. So
Hmm.
there's no
Sorry.
evidence to support that, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. We've just heard that Trump has officially called for a recount now in Wisconsin. He's 20,000 votes behind. Even the governor, the Republican governor of Wisconsin, said that there's only likely to be 100 or two votes in it, but it's probably not worth it. But that is what Trump is going for, and presumably in hope that a recount will turn up another 20,000 votes for him. I think if he did that, then we'd have a lot more questions about legitimacy to ask. But we do move on now a wee bit. And Ian Blackford MP challenged Boris Johnson to condemn the US President Donald Trump's false claims of major fraud in the House of Commons today. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the SNP's Westminster leader said, "I would like to take the opportunity to send my best wishes to our friends in the US during this anxious time. Donald Trump claimed an unsupported victory and major fraud, with millions of legitimate ballots left to count. I hope the Prime Minister will join me in condemning his actions this morning." However, the Prime Minister failed to condemn the actions of the President or answer the question. Commenting, SNP Westminster leader Ian Blackford said, "The US elections are a decision for the American people, but the outcome matters to the whole world, as does the importance of upholding the integrity of democracy." Now, Fatima, I'm going to come to you first on this. Boris Johnson there not willing to condemn a leader claiming victory before the votes are counted. Does it give you a lot of confidence when we start to look at Boris Johnson perhaps negotiating over an independence referendum?
Absolutely not, because it's a question about respecting democracy. And at the time Trump said that, there were still millions of votes to count. But Boris obviously has still refused to condemn him, and we've seen other leaders do so. So of course, be honest, from the beginning, I haven't had faith in Boris Johnson negotiating over referendum over the internal market bill. I haven't had any faith in that because you do get the sense about how he approaches matters in relation to devolved nations, where we're basically reduced to a non-entity. And even regarding the internal market bill, where it's a clear power grab as well. So I cannot, for any reason, think that we're going to get any respect in this regard, and democracy won't be respected here. So the world is watching the country. The world is watching the UK too. And for Boris to find it's a question he can dodge, raises questions about his own response, his own attitude towards democracy. I've seen Twitter ban 2 tweets from Trump for potentially spreading misleading information about an election. So that's certainly these actions that everyone is watching. As I mentioned, the whole world is watching. And then for Boris to think that it's a question that he can dodge when there's a clear disregard for democratic process from Trump. So it does say a lot about Boris's actions. Your response to situations tells a lot about you, and it tells a lot about us, about Boris as a politician.
Yeah, and Chris, this kind of situation where the leader of the free world supposedly is so far out with the norms of what we expect from a political leader. We've just heard that he's launched a legal challenge in Michigan to try and have the vote counting stopped. So again, Chris, it shows this contempt for democracy, this contempt for the rule of law. What do you think happens if Donald Trump does somehow eke out a victory here, does potentially stop some votes getting counted and wins that way? What do you think that does to the state of the world as a whole?
Well, for a start, I hate this tagline. The president
of the free world.
World. That is overplayed, overused, and very, very undervalued. And to be honest with you, I don't think that we've had a decent president of the free world since JFK. But then I'm slightly biased, obviously, with my Irish Catholic links. But in saying that, what we have to watch here, and I said so at the start of the show, because it is of vaudevillian proportions. You know, that Donald Trump was always destined to set a sideshow, you know, in order to try and delegitimize what is actually going on. But what actually I can't understand, and maybe you could maybe shed a light on this, you know, from a personal view yourself, Kenneth, is that if he is saying now that the vote is subject to fraud, and we accept that, or the mainstream media accepts that. What happens if Biden doesn't win and Trump wins? Does that then delegitimize his voting allegation?
I imagine whatever happens, if things fall in Trump's favor, then it will be the way it was always meant to be in his mind. Yeah, Wisconsin has just now been called by NBC, one of the major US networks, for Biden, and that doesn't necessarily mean that every vote has been counted, but it does mean that they believe it's beyond dispute at this point. Sorry, Chris, quickly.
Kenny, sorry. The other thing that I wanted to make, because I did want to highlight what Ian Blackford was chaffing on about this afternoon, which I found absolutely bizarre, long before Ian Blackford got to his feet. Having watched some of the content from CNN and actually NBC as well, you know, along with, you know, a shady mix of Sky News, I certainly didn't put the BBC on. But what got me was the fact that they were wheeling out these English, and I will say it, and you know, people can phone in and complain, but they were wheeling out these English politicians who were all crying about the fact that democracy has to be served in America. That's all very well, that democracy has to be served in America, but these same English politicians are denying Scotland to have their democracy served up here. So stick that in your pipe, you know, particularly to Nigel Farage and Lisa Nandy and your man Fox, or you know, whatever his bloody name is. Where is the democracy when it comes down to Scotland? You know that they are flying in the face of you know, turn up and you know, get paid, I don't know, whatever appearance money that they get paid in order to, you know, appear in these shows. Personally, if Broadcasting Scotland was, you know, to offer me appearance money, I would give it right back and reinvest it into, you know, broadcasting for Scotland. But not really. We have to be asking the question about why is democracy okay for them and it's not all right for us.
Yeah, well, we do move on now, and the SNP has said that the Chancellor must confirm that Scotland will receive the full 80% furlough and self-employed payments on current eligibility whenever it's requested by the Scottish Government in the months ahead. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions today, Ian Blackford challenged the Prime Minister to clear up the mess of his own government's making, and confirmed, will Scotland receive the full 80% furlough and self-employed payments on current eligibility whenever requested by the Scottish Government? Boris Johnson appeared to confirm this by responding, "I in no way budge from that commitment," and said the Chancellor would outline the plans tomorrow. It comes after a week of confusion and evasion from the Tory government. On Monday, the Prime Minister gave the original commitment in response to a question from Ian Blackford. However, the Treasury then refused to confirm it with journalists or the Scottish Government, And Tory ministers, including Robert Jenrick and Steve Barclay, attempted to backtrack on the commitment when asked by journalists and MPs. So, Fatima, this has been batted back and forth. Boris Johnson seems to know what he wants, but the rest of the cabinet and the Treasury seem to be a bit more lukewarm on it. Out of that, between Boris Johnson, Robert Jenrick, and Steve Barclay, who do you trust the most?
That's a very difficult question, but
I
maybe
know
I
I'm
need
good
the
at these
answer
ones.
actually. None, because anything that's coming out from England, we've seen a lot of broken promises. As First Minister said, we've been calling for an extension to the furlough scheme for months, and it cannot be right. She did say that it cannot be right that the only time that additional financial support is made available is when the south of England needs it and when they're going into lockdown. So we've been calling for furlough for a long time. We're only getting it because England's going into lockdown, and yet they cannot even answer whether they cannot give us a clear, coherent answer as to whether we will all get this furlough. So we should be seeing it extended to 2021, and we should get a uniform response in regards to whether this will be extended. So it just shows the blatant disregard for the devolved nations with regards to furlough and the needs of all the nations that make up the United Kingdom. So, of course, forgive us for being uncertain, forgive us for being wary that what the government is telling us now, we're not going to get it. So we need to hear it from all of them. And Boris is not the person I'm going to listen to in this context, because I've seen a lot of broken promises from him.
And
So
Fatima,
we need to hear it now.
when you look at this, we've seen, for example, the last minute change of mind about extending the furlough scheme. It was changed at, about 24 or 48 hours notice. We're now seeing this confusion over whether furlough will be available to the devolved nations if they need it. And yet there's the Prime Minister now saying there will be a decision announced tomorrow. What do you think is going on with these last minute decisions, the level of confusion? Is this just absolute incompetence at Whitehall, or do you think there is some kind of chaotic strategy behind it all?
Organised chaos from the UK government, I'll have to say that. Not clear on, from the beginning, from March, we should have gone into lockdown to get ahead of this, and they left it too long down in the UK, and now we're seeing cases escalate. We could have done a lot more to scale back on the damage that this has caused. So looking at all the decisions they've made, is either they are not taking into consideration the bigger picture and the impact it's having on the UK, or they're just there to they're not putting health and well-being of people first. They're trying to put the economy first. So their priorities are all wrong, and it's making them I think, give unclear decisions based on the fact that they don't want to admit the fact that they're not really worried at all about the public. They're more worried about the economy. So I wait till tomorrow. I'll see what happens then, because I'm not going to say I'm going to hope for this outcome, because we're talking about Boris and the broken promises he's made, and the fact that we aren't seeing a lot of positive action towards the devolved nations regarding response to coronavirus. So let's just see what happens tomorrow.
Yeah, well, we do move on now, still in Whitehall. And the UK government has awarded a new £347 million COVID-19 testing contract to Randox, the Tory-linked private healthcare company whose testing kits had to be recalled over the summer because of concerns about contamination, according to a report in today's Guardian. The deal is a 6-month extension of an existing contract and was agreed without other companies being invited to bid. It means the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has now approved transfers of nearly £500 million to the Northern Ireland-based company since the pandemic began. Disclosed in a filing on a European contract website, the award has prompted concerns about cronyism and calls for an independent inquiry into the £12 billion spent so far on attempting to control the pandemic through the test and trace system. Critics raised further concerns about a separate revelation that the Conservative MP and former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Owen Paterson, who is paid £100,000 a year to act as a consultant for Randox, was party to a call between the company and James Bethell, the health minister responsible for coronavirus testing supplies. The disclosure raises fresh questions about Patterson's continuing work for Randox and the efficacy of the Code of Conduct for MPs, which is supposed to limit their work as paid lobbyists and regulate access to ministers. Legislators must not also be lobbyists, said a spokesperson for the campaign group Transparency International. Now, Chris, when it comes to the Tory ministers siphoning off money to preferred companies, I'm sure you have a few thoughts.
Again, Kenny, you've done the exact same thing to me as what you've done to Fatima there. Yet again, you've taken me up a dark alley. I mean, what it is the Tories' connection with dark money. Greasing the palm of their friends and cohorts. And what we see here is the fact that this is the way that the new Tory party are operating. I say the new Tory party because I personally believe that this is the way that the Tory party has always operated. But, because of the advent of social media, because of the advent of the internet, I think I would recoil in horror if the internet was available when Margaret Thatcher was going through her tenure to actually sneak a preview into some of the internal communications within that party. I'm talking about with regards to the minors that were blacklisted and the various sex scandals that were going on within Westminster at that time, which was closely linked to paedophilia and all the rest of it. When you get down to it, this is the crux of the matter. And like as I said earlier on with America, is the fact that the English government, and I say the English government, have a vested interest in capitalism. And capitalism, with its many, many different heads, upon the one serpent, is the fact that they all are looking for backhanders, brown envelopes, you name it. It is absolutely rife. And it is only now, as I say, because we've got the advent of the internet, that these things are coming to light. Now, with regards the outrageous contracts that are given to so-called healthcare professionals, and I say that so-called healthcare professionals because one of them was actually registered as a sweet confectioner, and the other one was dabbling in bike repairs or something like that. It is absolutely ludicrous. It is completely ludicrous, the fact that they managed to evade any scrutiny whatsoever. What this agenda is, because, I mean, make no mistake, I don't think that Boris Johnson, in his wildest dreams, ever believed that he would ever going to become Prime Minister. And when he became Prime Minister, he then set about by repaying all his backers by awarding them lucrative contracts, in a way of, sort of like, thank you very much and stuff like that. I've got to where I want to get in the pinnacle of my career. And that is the Etonian way. It's, pay back a favour and stuff like that. Whatnot, what have you. But what the other side of the coin, which I really do have to highlight, is that, and I think it was Joe Monlam, the QC, the fair justice chap. He actually done a table and added up the various amounts of alleged payments to various companies and stuff like that, that would be enough to bankroll the NHS for the next 5 years with an extra 10,000 NHS healthcare workers. So, you know, that people have to sort of like get themselves a wee notepad and scribble all these things down as they're happening and then total it up, because it is honestly, it is greasing the you know, there's the famous saying, you never bite the hand that feeds you. And quite clearly, these people have been feeding Boris Johnson, and now they are getting their just rewards or just desserts.
Well, before we go on, I will just stress all of that is allegations. We have no direct proof of much of what Chris may have said there. And also, in case you didn't know, Chris McCusker represents the socialist group in the SNP, just in case that wasn't obvious. But we move on now, and the SNP's shadow immigration minister has slammed the Home Office for its complete disregard of devolved governments following exchange in today's Home Affairs Select Committee. Stuart MacDonald MP highlighted that the UK immigration system needs more flexibility to account for the needs of different parts of the UK, and urged the Home Office to engage with the Scottish Government on this issue. Both suggestions that Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross made as recently as Monday. In response to this, Home Office Minister Kevin Foster ruled out looking at a more flexible migration system and even refused to meet with the Scottish Migration Minister, saying the department is not planning on having meetings with spokespersons on reserved matters from the devolved administrations. Fatima, this is almost exactly what you were saying earlier in the show, just the UK government showing its disregard for the devolved governments. This comment about the not wanting to meet with spokespersons from the devolved governments, it does just seem a wee bit like a deliberate thumb in their nose at the Scottish Government, doesn't it, though? No, I think we may have lost Fatima's sound for the moment.
Hello?
Oh no, we've got you back. We've got you back. Go on.
Okay, sorry about that. No, as I was saying, that this is just obviously a blatant disregard for Scotland and reducing us to a non-entity. Immigration is a really important issue for Scotland, but the fact that it's reserved and very London-centric, it does nothing for Scotland, and we are feeling the negative consequences. We need immigration. We need to be able to control. We need to be able to get these powers to create a system that's fit for Scotland. And what we need is more immigration. And obviously, these powers are reserved with Westminster, so we are really at the mercy of what Westminster is doing in that regard. The fact that they're basically snubbing SNP, they're snubbing people from Scotland to consult or even to just speak on these matters. It just says a lot about their approach and their understanding of the unique characteristics of each country and the diverse needs of each country. Because Scotland and England, the situation is not the same. And the fact that they're willing to overlook this just goes to show who they make the policies for and who they are said to benefit. If they can't even consult with other devolved nations who are going to be impacted by whatever decision they make on an issue that's reserved.
And
so
Fatima,
we have very limited. Yeah.
Sorry, no, I was just going to ask about Douglas Ross having made calls for some sort of flexibility in the immigration system. We've seen Douglas Ross a couple of times recently diverging from the UK government line to say something more in line with what policy is, what public opinion is in Scotland. Do you believe that Douglas Ross is actually trying to steer the UK government in a different direction?
No.
I'm just waiting for him to talk himself into the SNP and talk himself into an independent Scotland at this rate. No, but I feel Douglas Ross, as a Scottish Tory leader, I think in a way is trying to show that we are in a union, but that's long past. There's nothing he can do to save this. I think that's just him trying to talking shop, just being a good publicity person. And he's saying things that he knows he can deliver on. I don't really think he believes it. I think he's just, as I said, talking shop, just trying to get unconvinced people and maybe independent people to possibly see that he's actually trying to do something for the benefit of Scotland, but that's long gone. I don't think anyone's falling for that at all. And yeah, too little too late, to be honest, if he's actually genuinely trying to make an effort.
Well, we stay at Westminster just now, and the SNP's Gavin Newlands has ramped up calls on the UK government and opposition parties to back his bill, which seeks to ban the exploitative practice of firms firing workers and then rehiring them on significantly reduced terms. As further restrictions come into place across the UK to tackle the pandemic, the MP for Paisley and Renfrewshire North reintroduced his Employment, Dismissal and Re-employment Bill in the House of Commons today in an attempt to protect workers across the UK. Support for the bill has continued to grow, with nearly 100 other MPs signing an open letter to the Business Secretary calling for action earlier this year. Currently, employees have no protection against bosses threatening the sack if workers do not accept wage cuts, allowing companies such as British Airways and Centrica to force staff to take huge pay cuts under threat of unemployment in the middle of an economic crisis. Chris, I know this is a bill that you have been following closely, a campaign that matters a lot to you, particularly with reference to those airline workers. What do you make of Gavin Newland's campaign, and do you think there is a chance that this bill can be somehow got through the Commons?
Well, I'm glad that you brought this up, Kenny, because this is a bill that has been backed and ratified by the SNP Trade Union Group for discussion at conference. And this again, as Fatima wonderfully highlighted, is in stark contrast to what the UK government, or how the UK government would wish to treat workers with regards the hire and fire. I seen a tweet earlier on today, and for the life of me, I can't remember who actually made the tweet. It'll come to me possibly as I'm talking, but basically he was saying that you know that the Tory government are showing signs of rolling back on this. And what I was the point that I made to that tweet was, it's all very well rolling back on it, but what we are now seeing is the fact that employers are rehiring on vastly reduced terms and conditions, also vastly reduced hourly rates. And you know, this is basically an extension of the gig economy, which has been championed, by the UK government as being the, the economy to surpass the previous economies that Britain was built upon, such as manufacturing and industry. Up until, I mean, can you imagine back in 1974 turning round to a miner or a steel worker or a fabricator and stuff like that and saying, right, okay, after your strike, you can go home, sit in your jacksie for a couple of weeks, and then we'll take you back on a reduced hourly rate. And by the way, you're only going to get half an hour for your dinner break. You're going to get no sick pay. You're going to get no holiday pay. But at the end of the day, weigh up consequences. What do you want to do? Deliver parcels and have no rights whatsoever? Or do you want to continue in the technical skills that are actually building this country, and what you are good at? And the Tory party, in pursuit of their capitalism, have got the British workers over a barrel, and that is due to the ever-changing demographics of the actual demands of the economy, but also with the carefully changed or should I say, the various changes that the Tory party have done to the trade union bill throughout the years, which is, being liquidated down to a lesser former form of what it used to be back in, dare I suggest, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And that's down to Thatcher laid the ground level for that, and subsequent Tory prime ministers thereafter have built upon that in order to squeeze the manual workers out, the skilled workers out, and everything is now in the play park of the capitalists in order to exploit the people who are, at the coalface, shall we say,
Well, Chris,
working day to day and week to week and month to month.
Yeah, we do have to move on there. We are hoping to have Gavin Newlands on the show sometime very soon to discuss this bill and the campaign that he's been working on with that. So hopefully we'll have an update on that for you very soon. Our next story, further steps to tackle inequalities in the workplace and help women return to work following a career break have been announced by Fair Work Minister Jamie Hepburn. A new Women Returners programme, backed by £500,000 and following on from a 2018-19 pilot scheme, will fund projects that help to address gender inequality in the workplace and build on the Scottish Government's commitment to reduce the gender pay gap. A further £850,000 will be available through the Workplace Equality Fund to help organisations to develop more inclusive and diverse workplaces. So, Fatima, obviously this is not going to solve the problems of gender inequalities in employment overnight. Do you think this is a good place for the Scottish Government to start its efforts?
I welcome it as a step towards providing a solution, because I think the main challenge that we're facing here, if I were to look at this through a lens, is the systems and structures that are in place that are discriminatory towards women. So it has a lot to do with organisational structures, the patriarchal society that we're in that really needs to get challenged and sorted out. So I do feel that in terms of some of these proposals, we might see a case. I hope we don't see a case of tick box exercises. I hope we don't see a case of all talk and no action from many companies. So I do feel that there will be a lot of pressure and constant review and evaluation in terms of progress regarding this, because changing systems and structures, which is what's needed, is going to take a lot more time, and it's something we have to be bold with. So I do welcome this as a first step, but it's not it should be a means to an end, but certainly not an end. That's what I feel.
That's fine. Well, that's great. We move on now to our final story of the evening. And commenting on the publication of a new Scottish Government report into grouse-moor management, Scottish Green Rural Economy spokesperson John Finney said, "It's welcome that the Scottish Government is exploring alternatives to grouse moors. This report shows that alternative uses would boost Scotland's rural economy. A move to conservation or renewable energy, for example, would dwarf the economic impact of grouse-moor management. Previous research has shown this would also create new jobs, especially in forestry. However, while this research recognises the growing public and political concern about grouse-moors, it ignores some key issues. For example, the persecution of eagles and other raptors damages Scotland's reputation as an ecotourism destination, yet there's no mention of it. It also fails to address the damaging impact of moor burn on our climate ambitions. The Scottish Government has dragged its heels for almost a year since the Werrity Review published its limited findings. During that time, we've seen the burning of peatland and the killing of wildlife continue. People have been shooting grouse even during COVID restrictions. Scotland's lands needs to be freed up for the economic and social benefit of all its people and used in ways that contributes to a thriving rural economy and natural environment. It's time for the Scottish Government to get on with it." And Chris, we only have a couple of minutes here, but we have heard repeated claims from all sorts of research that there is almost nothing we could do with these grouse moors that would be less valuable to the economy or the ecology or to the people in the area than grouse shooting. It's it's just there to serve the very, very wealthy who take advantage of that shooting season. What do you make of what John Finney had to say today?
Well, I'm in shall we? I'm going to shock the viewers and show my green credentials here, because this is something that desperately needs sorted out, and I wholeheartedly support. I love my country. I love its countryside. I love its wildlife and all its shapes and forms, and I desperately want the SNP to learn off of the Green benches when it comes to land reform, and when it comes to sharing our countryside where it benefits the whole of our society. We have to remember, something that obviously was not taught in my history classes at school, and I would possibly say that neither yours either, Kenny, that Scottish history, for so many Scottish citizens actually lived off of the land and lived off of the benefit of the landed gentry, just in order to furrow the land and raise crops and stuff like that, and to sell at the market and whatnot and what have you. And that has been closed down. And when you take into the fact that what they were allowed to do was they were allowed to forage off the land, so they were allowed to shoot or kill game. They were allowed to fish. They were allowed to dig their own peat and stuff like that in order to keep themselves warm. What have you. We have to get back to that, because that is quintessentially Scottish. And so many people have been displaced off of their lands by big corporate landlords who live in the heart of London and Kensington and all the rest of it, and come up here for the odd weekend and extend the rule of 6 to the rule of 32 just because they can invite Hodder and Modder and all the rest of it from the Medway and the middle of Surrey, up for a weekend to don their green Wellingtons and God knows whatever they call them, those parka jackets, and God knows, it drives me absolutely crazy. It really does.
Well, Chris, that's a perfect place for us to end, I think. I would like to thank both Fatima Joji and Grizz McCusker for joining us. It has been a fun show, even while discussing some fairly depressing stories. But that is just about all we have time for. Before we go, I do have to ask you, if you're able to support Broadcasting Scotland, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up there as a supporter, and your £5 a month is what helps us, firstly, keep the lights on here, and secondly, to keep developing and keep growing as an alternative broadcaster for Scotland. We absolutely rely on you to donate, so if you're able to, please do. If you're not able to, we do understand. We know times are tough for an awful lot of people just now, and the shows will always be free to view online. You will always be welcome here, whatever you can contribute. But you can still make a big difference for us by following us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, by finding our Facebook page, by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking the bell icon while you're there. Make sure you get updated when we have a new video coming out. And then share these shows around with your friends, your family, whoever else. There's always work to be done in spreading the word about Broadcasting Scotland. So do please help us out that way. And finally, we're always looking for new people to come and help out here in the studio and around the country in helping us get the news to you. We always have, we're trying to get on the daily briefings more often, but that's difficult if I'm not available. So we're looking for people who might be available to do that kind of thing. But anything that you're interested in doing in broadcasting, whether it's journalism, technical things with the cameras and the sound, or appearing on screen where I am, we have options for you. So do please get in touch with us if you've got any interest in helping us to build that better broadcaster for Scotland. That is absolutely all we have time for tonight, though. So I will say thanks once again to Chris McCusker and Fatima Joji. Gordon will be back again tomorrow at 7 with another Scotland at 7. But until then, have a great evening. Good night.